Now let's move to this Victorian period, or the Victorian age, or the Victorian period, or the Victorian style of writings. Queen Victoria was the last Hanoverian monarch, and this is considered the long reign from 1837 to 1901. Okay, and this is a period, heyday of colonial trade and commerce, period of exploding population. Then society is considered to have been priggish, moralistic, and narrow-minded during this period. Okay, and every Victorian literature witnessed the continuing spirit of romanticism. All of a sudden, in 1837, you can't say like, okay, all the romantic elements are now cut and taken away. Now this is Victoria. You can't do like that. So the Victorian writers, the writers who were writing during the Victorian period, were also continuing to have this romantic temperament in their writings. The spirit of romanticism was, of course, continuing. Then later, Victorian literature saw the rise of modernism. So the Victorian style is a combination of, in the earlier period, we can see the influence of romanticism, and towards the end, you can see the influence of modernism. So this is a period which bridges the romantic and modern period or modern literature. Then major events during the Victorian reign. Which are the major events? Let's see. A rise of technology and innovation. So that kind of a revolution was happening. That kind of a radical change was happening during this period. A rise of technology and innovation. The blast furnace was the trailblazer in this industrial revolution. Industrial revolution started during this period, and this blast furnace, which is used for smelting to produce industrial metals. Okay, and this furnace was the trailblazer in the Industrial Revolution. Of course, the spinning mill was there. Spinning mill revolutionized the textiles. Then powerful steam engines became popular during this time. The introduction of railways happened. So you can see the drastic changes, the world of machines, all these things happened during this Victorian period. Now coming to the Industrial Revolution. Industrial Revolution inaugurated the modern era of mass production and consumption. Began in England before it reached the other parts of Europe. So England is considered the trailblazer or the pioneer in to have this industrial revolution. Then methods of production changed. Till then we have this manual kind of productive systems, but the methods of production changed from manual to machine. It's an age of materialism. Okay, an age of materialism started, and the main aim was to produce large quantities of goods as quickly as possible. This was the major intention of this industrial revolution. Then companies were highly profit oriented. So as a consequence, what happened is that working class suffered from over exploitation. The workers united and formed trade union during this time. Then as part of the Industrial Revolution, you can see one of the major incidents happened during this time is the Great Exhibition of London. You must be definitely familiar with this, the Great Exhibition of London, which happened in 1851. Britain was the leader of this Industrial Revolution. I told you that Britain was having this Industrial Revolution. They were the leader, or they were considered the trailblazers of this. So they proclaimed themselves to be the leader of Industrial Revolution, and to symbolize this leadership, the Great Exhibition of London was held in Hyde Park in London, in a specially constructed Crystal Palace. For this exhibition, they specially constructed a Crystal Palace. Why it is Crystal Palace? Because one can see from inside and outside. That was the peculiarity. So they created a special crystal palace for this, and they invited all the nations, including the third world nations. They invited everyone to take part in the exhibition. Definitely Britain was having all the prestigious innovations in that exhibition, and they proclaimed themselves to be the best or the leader of this industrial revolution. It was a nationalistic parading, in fact, a parading of the accomplishments of Britain, and gave expression to the smug satisfaction or Victorianism. And let's see what are the major incidents happened. Of course, the Great Exhibition of London is there, and Indian Rebellion of 1857. Okay, for Britishers, it is the mutiny of Sepoys, Sipahi Lahla. We know that, right? So it is the mutiny of the Sepoys of the army of the Indian Company. And for Indians, it was the first war of independence. That is the difference in perspectives. So many Britishers were killed during this rebellion, which was, of course, a setback for the Britishers. Then literature based on this Indian rebellion. You can imagine the importance of Indian rebellion with the production of literary pieces on this particular theme. Do you know any of the literary work on the theme of Indian mutiny? Yes, John Masters' Night Runners of Bengal, which was published in 1951. The Night Runners of Bengal by John Master. This was based on this Indian mutiny. Of course, J.G. Farrell's The Siege of Krishnapur. The Siege of Krishnapur, which was published in 1973, was also based on this. Then, of course, Lord Alfred Tennyson's ballad, The Defence of Lucknow. The Defence of Lucknow, which was published in 1879. This is an account of the heroic resistance by the English soldiers when these people were creating troubles, how the English soldiers heroically resisted this struggle. This was the theme of Tennyson's ballad, The Defence of Lucknow. So all this happened during this time. And also it's very important to see what is the status of, or what was the status of Ireland in the Victorian period. Ireland was a separate country but under the British rule. This 19th century famines and civil unrest, all these problems were happening in Ireland. Population of Ireland halved and did not take part in the Industrial Revolution. So all those things happening during this time. You must know what is the relation of Ireland, what is the status of Ireland. Now coming to the Chartist movement. In 1837, 6 members of the parliament and 6 working men formed a committee and published the People's Charter in 1838, which demanded the parliamentary reforms and voting rights. Many working class movements from 1838 to 1848 together called the Chartist movement. Connecting to this, you should also be familiar with the Great Reform Acts. Great Reform Act of 1832, 1867 and 1884. All extended voting rights to previously disfranchised citizens, leading to controversies. Women were not allowed to vote until 1919, 18 years after Queen Victoria's death. And after that, there happened 2 wars during this period. One is the Boer War, and that is between Dutch and Britain on the colony of South Africa. And the second one is the Crimean War. Now coming to the socio-cultural background, how England was and what is the socio-cultural background of England. England became the leading industrial power during this period, an empire that occupied more than that of a quarter of the earth's surface. You must be familiar with the phrase that a land where sun never sets. So England was at the peak of this position. A mood of nationalist pride and optimism about future progressed during this period. The expansion expanded wealthy middle class, but the deterioration in rural England. Though Britain was projecting the wealthy side of their country, of course, the working class was suffering like hell during this period. Now, the main idea during this period is the Victorian dilemma. Victorian period was an age of doubt in religion, literature, and philosophy. Conflict between science and religion was there. It following the publication of Darwin's Origin of Species, which was published in 1859, this conflict started to affect the people. Conflict between industrial and agrarian ways of life was also an issue, and a conflict between oligarchy and monarchy was another problem. So all these kind of dilemmas were existing during this period. Darwin's theories provoked in Victorian literature a wave of pessimism and skepticism about human condition. Till then, all theories put mankind in a superior position, and Darwin's Origin of Species challenged all these superior positions of imposed on this mankind. And connecting to Darwin's Origin of Species, there emerged some socio-political theories called social Darwinism, in which the concept of the survival of the fittest is entertained. And Darwinism appealed to scientists like Thomas Henry Huxley, as well as to many novelists and poets of that period. Elizabeth Gaskell is a novelist who included this concept of social Darwinism in her writings. Of course, George Eliot's Middlemarch is regarded a demonstration of social Darwinism. Then Thomas Hardy's Tess of the D'Urbervilles and Jude the Obscure are two novels which present Darwinian world where the characters are at the mercy of their environment. Then positivism is another major idea during this Victorian period. Positivism is developed by the French philosopher Auguste Comte. It's a form of empiricism. Every rational assertion can be scientifically verified, and it regards metaphysical speculations as meaningless. A sense of perceptions are the only source of knowledge. This is what the major idea proposed by this idea, positivism. This reflected the general tone of Victorian social optimism. Just like positivism, aestheticism was also one of the major ideas proposed during the Victorian period. Aestheticism rejected John Ruskin's and Matthew Arnold's utilitarian view of art as something moral and useful, because the utilitarian idea which was prevalent during the Victorian period was suggesting that any kind of work of art or any literary piece should show its own utility for the happiness or pleasure or whatever it is. So then only that particular piece of art will be having a kind of value. So related to the decadence and symbolism and fantasiacal writers, this aesthetic movement upheld the view that art for art's sake. Okay, utility doesn't have to work in this. Art is for art's sake. It developed a cult of beauty. Walter Pater, Oscar Wilde, A.C. Swinburne, etc. are the major figures associated with this aesthetic movement. Another major movement is the Oxford movement. It's an affiliation of High Church Anglicans, and most of them are the members of this University of Oxford. And this movement is also known as the Tractarian movement because they published a series of publications and tracts by all these writers. So it is called the Tractarian movement. Then the women question was also developed during this period. In fact, the woman question is raised by Mary Wollstonecraft in her pamphlet, A Vindication of the Rights of Women, which influenced the mid and late Victorian feminists. These early feminists urged upper class women to obtain education and profession to make themselves financially independent. Elizabeth Gaskell, Frances Trollope, etc. are some of the writers. Of course, Charlotte Bronte, George Eliot, all these writers criticized the women's social marginalization, and they were trying their level best to boost the women of Victorian society to come out of these shackles. Then the new woman is a term coined by Sarah Grant in 1894. It is the cultural icon of enthusiasm. It's a departure from the stereotypical Victorian woman, because this stereotypical Victorian woman is like very weak, meek, shy, who is in the four walls, who is confined into the four walls of the house like an angel in the house. So they attributed some features or qualities to the Victorian heroine, like intelligent, educated, emancipated, independent, and self-supporting. Not only the middle class or upper class women, but also the factory and office workers were also attributed with all these qualities and features. It shows the dissatisfaction with the contemporary position of women in marriage and in the social position. There are many new woman novels roused during this period. The heroines fight against this angel in the house concept, and they challenge the old codes of conduct and morality. Such novels deal frankly with sex and marriage. The three major areas of marginalization are marriage, labor market, and suffrage. The conventional marriage was criticized as a trap, and the wives or those who are trapped into this institutionalized marriage system is known as the victims of domestic violence. So they started to articulate all these issues during this period. Not only women writers, there are many male writers were also proposing this idea, this new woman concept. George Meredith, George Gissing, Grant Allain, etc. are some of the writers who brought this new woman idea in their writings. Of course, Thomas Hardy was also there among these writers. Then coming to the literary features of Victorian era, there are two major trends. One is the insistence on morality and propriety, and the next thing is the revolt against the convention or conservatism. Okay, you can see Tennyson and Dickens were focusing on this insistence on morality and all, while Thomas Carlyle, Arnold, Thackeray, Browning, all these writers were against this conventional style or conservatism. So new ideas propagated in science, religion, politics, and all these reflected in literature too. Now coming to the major poets of Victorian period. Who are the major poets? You must be familiar with many. Still, Alfred Tennyson, Robert Browning, Elizabeth Barrett Browning, Matthew Arnold, Arthur Hugh Clough, etc. are some of the poets, the popular poets of Victorian period. And the pre-Raphaelite brotherhood also very important to be noted in the Victorian period. D.G. Rossetti, A.C. Swinburne, Edward Fitzgerald, etc. are the popular figures associated with the pre-Raphaelite brotherhood who were focusing on the paintings and all. Now coming to the Victorian genres, apart from the novels and poetry, you can see autobiographies, melodrama, satire, comic operas, essays, art and literary criticism. All these genres were popular during the Victorian period. Victorian novels were showing not only skepticism and pessimism, but also the prosperity and optimism. Realism and naturalism were also included or incorporated in the works. Novels, usually the Victorian novels were serialized and were popular in nature. And of course, you can see the Newgate fiction, the crime and crime, sex and violence, because New Newgate is the name of the infamous London prison. You must be knowing that, right? The ideas or the themes of crime, sex, and violence were associated with this Newgate fiction. Then, of course, sensation novels were there. Detective fiction was there. Wilkie Collins, Arthur Conan Doyle. Then, all these writers were associated with these kind of genres. And concerned with history, society, economics, philosophy, everything is what to say, experimented. Everything is experimented during this period. Then writing for children, of course, that is also very important. Writing for children was there. Lewis Carroll, R.L. Stevenson, Thomas Hughes, etc. are some of the writers who were associated with this children's writings. Then the social novels, of course, I told you that coming to the later part of the Victorian society, the second part of the Victorian period, you can see the realistic portrayal of social life, which was against the rapid industrialization, depicted the suffering of the poor, and such novels are usually referred to as industrial novels or the condition of England writings. Okay, industrial novels or the condition of England writings. Condition of England question, it was a term coined by or used by Thomas Carlyle in his work Chartism, which was published in 1839. And it deals with the question of how to resolve the tension between the new working class and the owners. Okay, just like that, The Cry of the Children, it's a work by Elizabeth Barrett Browning, and she portrayed the suffering of children in mines and factories during that time. Then Frederick Engels has written The Condition of Working Class in 1845. He spent 20 months with the working class people, the industrial conditions. He observed the industrial conditions in Manchester. He spent 20 months for that, and later he wrote this particular work, The Condition of Working Class, in 1845, and later in 1848 we could see the Communist Manifesto. Then Dickens' Hard Times, Benjamin Disraeli's Sybil or The Two Nations, Elizabeth Gaskell's Mary Barton, Charlotte Bronte's Shirley. All these novels were dealing with the social condition, this industrial, the negative sides of this rapid industrialization, etc. And who are the major writers during the Victorian period? The novelists, numerous in numbers, of course, numerous in numbers. William Makepeace Thackeray, Bronte sisters, George Eliot, Samuel Butler, Lewis Carroll, Thomas Hardy, Henry James, R.L. Stevenson, Thomas Babington, John Ruskin. There are many in number. Okay, then coming to the last 10 years, 1890 to 1900, this last 10 years is known as fantasiacal. Okay, and especially in France, the origin is in France, and during this last 10 years, you can see the tendency to write in the modernist form. Okay, the modernist elements were introduced during this time, and a shift from the strict moral codes of Victorian society was seen during this period. The features of this fantasiacal is like lethargy, envy, that is the lack of the spirit. Then they rejected this interest or that kind of patriotic feeling or that enthusiasm, and these writers were lacking all those things. A loose kind of writing initiated during this period. A.C. Swinburne, Oscar Wilde, Arthur Symons, Ernest Dowson, Lionel Johnson, etc. are the major figures of this kind of writing. Then after that you can see, so with that last 10 years, you can see the shift to modernism. So many movements or so many ideas like impressionism, expressionism, surrealism, dadaism, all these made a start during this period. So, in a nutshell, that is what all about the Victorian period. I know that this is just an overall idea, whether it is romantic or Victorian, this is just an overall idea, and you have to develop with these ideas. And